Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Like a tay in the wind, we are back for our fourth season here at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Woohoo!
So happy for you to be joining us again. Welcome. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. I am Joel Listman. And
I'm Ryan. That wasn't how I was expecting that lead in. Sorry. I'm so
Sorry.
used to the old ways.
sorry.
That was very formal.
Yeah, I don't know why I got so formal there. I guess maybe that's the direction I'm trying to take the show in the fourth
Maybe you're
season.
just the new year. You're just trying to open up to the world in a way that I never will.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess those who have seen the who watch the video feeds of the podcast, of course, probably see that my last name is on there, and on my little box, and Ryan's is not. So Ryan is a very private person.
Is that why? I didn't know that. That's just some preference window or something.
Yeah, it's when you
Like way back when we first did this in March
Mhm.
or whatever. I just signed up as only Ryan.
Yep. It'd be great if you
mine
actually changed yours says, let's see.
I'm Ryan Harris. It's not a secret, but
And yours is up as Rob Dunkelberg. So so that's dear listener, you heard we do we're starting the show off the way we ended the year. We are having it's a guest filled podcast, and of course it is our good friend Rob Dunkelberger.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course,
be
so glad to be here. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, Ryan. I don't think I ever officially said Happy New Year to you.
yeah, thanks.
And
I guess.
yeah, I
Back
mean,
at
it's
you.
February.
Yeah, it is almost February. We took a nice long a long winter's nap.
Yeah.
And
We were going to take a little winter's nap. This stuff happened in the world where the movie show, we
yeah, I don't
sort
know.
of go hide in our hovels and our caves when the world becomes newsworthy to the point that the movie show would seem tonally awkward.
Yep. I mean, there are times we just a little inside, apropos of really nothing. We, Ryan and I are parts of several different like text chains. Some with my wife, who is also a huge football fan, and so Ryan and my wife and I have a whole thread where we talk Viking football. Even that, it was like, I mean, this guy's gonna not be on the team. Do we
I
care
headed
today?
back into there because it's private, and I felt like I can pretend to care about this for a few minutes, and
Yeah.
I won't be judged. So I appreciate the Vikings thread very much because it's a place of it's a place of acceptance and solace.
Yep, it is a place where we can set aside the outside world.
Back when we
yes.
decided to make our movie opinions public and share them with the world, though, they became kind of something different. So not something bad, but a little different.
So even though it took us a while, and I think for obvious reasons why we decided to just say we're not gonna get into too much right now, but we feel it is time now, and we know that you, dear listener, have been clamoring. There have been I saw skywriting saying, "Where are you, Joel and Ryan?"
Did you?
And
where was that?
It was
in the northwest suburbs.
In northwest suburbs. So it was really interesting. What was great is I give whoever did that. I never found out who did the skywriting, but boy, they nailed the film ampersand thing. They absolutely nailed that.
That is talent.
No, that's not an ampersand, is it? No,
It
what is
is.
that called? That's the ampersand. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they nailed that, which I was so impressed with. There was a whole TikTok meme thing that was asking where we were. So yeah, so we're back. Is the long answer to
Yeah.
a question no one asked.
And normally we would do uh, um, alternative Oscar episode. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we would start the year by looking back all the way back at last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming up next week, so we're not. Don't worry, we're not going to deprive you of that. But something happened in the news that we've waited a few weeks on, but we didn't want to wait indefinitely to address, which was the passing of British filmmaker Michael Apted, who's just kind of awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
just like a real long sort of cinema. I don't know what you call him. Just cinema, like everyman in a way. But he does. He's done so much in so many different sort of platforms as a producer, as a documentarian, as a pretty steady Eddie Hollywood, um, kind of glossy Hollywood movie, part of the Hollywood movie machine, and everything else. And it's so I'm a big fan of his, even though I think we talked about it a little bit back when Alan Parker died, and we did that show. Like you, and it's the same for Michael. You see the pattern in his work as you work through it, and we'll see that today, which is kind of fun to see. But Michael is pliant enough, I think, more so than Alan, who really did just make every story he told his own in a way, or a guy like John Borman, who just literally tells the same story in a different setting over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool too. I mean, you making it personal is part of what makes the filmmaking unique, starting from the top down. But Michael was he was able to weave in and out of stuff, even though I think you'll see a pattern as we go. And we're definitely excited to have Rob here to talk over his stuff with him, because Rob's best versed of our friends. The other person who would have been great, although I think it'd be tough to drag her on here, is our esteemed introduction and outroduction voice artist, Sarah. I won't say her last name either, because she's a private person too, but she loves the Up series of documentaries and has for a long, long time, because they're special. So Joel, we don't usually play a fanfare when we're eulogizing somebody. So sorry if I stole your introduction there. Did you have something clever you
No,
wanted
no,
to
not
say
at
before we
all.
start?
Not at all. You absolutely nailed it. I was just going to again say, that we, when we were putting this together, we it was pretty clear that we were going to reach out to Rob on this, and so we're super happy to have Rob
Yeah.
on this show. So yeah, so Rob, shucks, yeah.
Buttered him up too much.
Yeah. Hey,
Now he's going to
Rob.
talk about a dead
I'm
guy
gonna
with a
clam
big
up.
silly grin on
Yeah.
his face for the whole hour and a half or whatever.
Hey, Rob, tell us about your feelings on Michael Apted.
Well, I think Ryan made a good point. He's not one of the greats. He's not Martin Scorsese. He's not a huge stylist. He's very much, I think, a lot of times a director for hire. But there's nothing wrong with that. He's sort of like a journeyman. He does find ways, and sometimes it's just in the juxtaposition of shots or scenes, to make comments on some general themes that he likes to follow. So he has that aspect. I think his towering achievement is the Up series. I think it's a monumental piece of filmmaking. It's important, and it's original. And there's nothing really like it. And for just that, he's worth noting his passing and marking it in some way, like we are today.
Walk us through, Rob, if you will, just I guess the origin of it, and then how the concept developed, so that people kind of, because that it's really well done, but it's very simply done. As filmmaking, it's not tremendously special. It really is a conceptually powerful thing.
Yep.
But it started without that in mind, if I understand. It started
Yes.
as a simple documentary about a bunch of school children, right?
Yep. It was originally a one-off for a television series. What is it called? World in Action. And
Which was an old BBC series, is that right?
it's actually an ITV series.
ITV, okay.
It was right after Britain decided to open things up. BBC had been the only game. They decided to go to a commercial model. And so they separated out. ITV became another channel, another option. And Granada
they needed
Television.
content, and one of them was this docu-series that they did.
Yep, Granada created this TV series, and Michael Apted did not direct the first one, which is called 7 Up, but he was a researcher, and it's actually like his first professional job for Granada Television was a researcher on this. He helped choose the children that would be used, and 7 years later, he decided to do a follow-up, which was called 7+7. And then he's just revisited these same children every 7 years. There's 14 of them. One dropped out after 21 Up and hasn't been back. A few others have dropped out for an episode here or there, or for 3 episodes, and are back. But he goes back every year, and they've gotten, it was first like 53 minutes, and the first 2 episodes are fairly short, 1 hour TV shows. And then they expand, because every time you need to sort of remind people who they were, because this began before videotape and things like that. So you're reminding people of who they are and showing these iconic clips from the earlier series.
But 7 Up, just going back to the origins of it, 7 Up was a really successful and very compelling piece of simple but piece of documentary sort of filming that was very memorable to people. But the leap to 7 years later, after that big chunk of time, that magic number that the series is sort of based around, that was Apt's idea, right? To revisit these people and see.
Yes.
So he like you say, he was an important element in the original, even though he was a young enough guy that it wasn't his big project, but it was his idea to revisit these people. And that was so, because 7 years go by and here are these same people again. I mean, it's as simple as that. Anyone could have had this idea. It's the Blair Witch Project of, it didn't even have to be scary. You just had to have the right idea, and you make $1 trillion. Right. This series didn't make $1 trillion, but it's brilliant in its simplicity, and it's so powerful to revisit the same people, the same faces as they move through their lives. They're almost their whole lives at this point. Because when was the first one? It was the early 70s.
1970.
No, the first one is 64. That's when 7 Up was, and then 7+7 was 1970.
Oh yeah,
and that's the first one that he actually directed and was fully in charge of.
So these people are in their 70s.
They're 63 now.
Yeah, because we just had, that was the last one thus far was 63 Up.
Been happening for like 56 years. They've been doing this, following these kids. And
anyway, you can kind of go back to your original thought. I just kind of wanted to sneak that idea in there before we got into the specifics of these films.
The conceit of the original show is this Jesuit motto that says, "Give me the child until he is 7, and I will give you the man." So they're basically saying, here's these 7-year-olds. This is what the politicians, the lawyers, the whatever will look like in 2000. In the year 2000, this is what these people will be. And it's really, the initial purpose was to kind of look at the class system in England at the time. And they break it off into, there are 3 kids from a pre-preparatory school. They all state right at age 7 what college they're going to go to, and their lives are all sort of mapped out. You've got a kid from the East End of London. You've got 3 girls from a working class school. You've got 2 kids from a charity boarding school. So they're sort of, you know, lower class, and they're just sort of thrown off by their families, and there's a place for them to go to be while things get sorted out at home, I guess. And you know, they took these kids from different places. There's 2 from a suburban school, and you see them at that age, and at every year as they go on, you see the changes that have happened, but you also see how at 7, in most cases, you have a decent idea of what they're going to be, you know, their personalities. Not everything that happens in their life. The film doesn't predict what they'll do with their lives, what will happen to them, but you do see their personalities. And it's fascinating to watch what happens in their lives, but the changes in their faces, the changes in their temperaments, their attitudes. It's about their lives, but it's really more about life itself. It's about this journey we're all on. And the older I get, as I watch those specific years, it really resonates with you at times. Roger Ebert was talking about 49 Up, and he said they all seem happier now. And I'm thinking, I turned 49 this year, and yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm probably more at peace with myself, my place in the world. You know, my kids are all getting to grown age, and I'm happier. And it's encouraging to see in 63 Up how they're all pretty much, yeah, no, life's been good. You know, they've let go of any of that. I need to achieve this. I need to do this. They're satisfied with what they did. They realize that their life is what it is. You can see in the earlier shows where they are, you know, angry, frustrated, you know, different things come out in different characters, and you can remember being like that. And I think we're all like that. We all have times where we're like, oh, this hasn't worked out, I'm frustrated, or this is important to do this. And the reality of life is,
it's interesting to me that this series started kind of at a perfect time for our generation to experience, because there were 7 and 64. None of us were around yet. It would another 10 years we would appear. So we've been watching this like in our 20s. We get to see them kind of 10, 20 years in advance.
Yep.
It really isn't. It's just a nice fit for us, because I haven't continued on with this, even though I found the first 4 of them or whatever, watching them like a life-changing experience. It really is. It really does affect you profoundly. And I'm glad to hear you sort of give these little tips into what some future ones are like. Because when I left them, it was very angsty and very, very stressful times for most of those people.
right.
And they are characters in the story, very much so, but of course they're actual people, and there's this lack of pretension with the way they deal with talking to the cameras, answering questions, you know, or just walking around in their life. That is it. That's any good documentarian, I suppose. Joel will tell you that. He watches a ton of documentaries. Everybody watches more documentaries than me, but that's capturing what's honest and what's real is everything. That's what makes it work. And he just, every second of it, he manages to do that. And And I thought I'd interject that. But the timing of it for us, I think, is really, really great because we got to be not quite 20 years behind them or whatever. You
get a glimpse of what's coming.
It tells the future
So,
in a lot of ways, like you're describing.
It's comforting to look at 49 and say, yeah, no, I'm kind of where most of them are. I've kind of come through that, and I know there's going to be struggles ahead and ups and downs or whatever, but there's a good chance come 63, if the world still exists, that I'm going to be, at peace with the trajectory
The direction
of my life, the direction of my life. And yeah, I mean, they wanted to really look at the class system, and what happened is, they shot it in 63, I believe, and that's the year the Beatles came on. You watch the first episode, and people at that time, the adults that you can see in the background or whatever, still wearing hats, ties, suits everywhere. And by the time they're 14, it looks like the 70s, because it is. And the world has moved on dramatically. So I think it's really an interesting time for this to have started, because so much changed. Because at 63, before the changes, things are happening that are going to change the world. But before that, you go back 50 years and people probably look the same. The styles have changed a little bit, but they've got their hats, their coats, their ties everywhere. And then now the world has changed so much; it's become more casual, whatever. And so class system was very much an issue at that time, and it has broken down over time. But you can still see that the rich kids, their trajectory was laid out for them, and they followed through and achieved that. The surprises are in some of the other kids. The suburban kid, Neil, I think, who wants to be an astronaut, then he wants to be a coach driver, and then at 21 he's homeless, and at 28 he's still homeless, and he is struggling with mental illness. And his story throughout up to 63, he sort of gets things together, but he's still obviously battling a lot of inner demons and things like that. And it's just fascinating what happens. One of his fellow participants actually reaches out to him, and I think it's like at 49 or 42, he's actually staying with him. But it's fascinating to see these kids. You see, and they provide you with the clips when you watch the newest one of, oh yeah, he was always very caring and very thoughtful, and then you're finding out he's reached out to Neil, and he's had him come stay with him while he gets his feet back on the ground and things like that. And then Neil, who struggles with mental illness, in this last episode, he got married in the interim and is separated now because of he tends to get a little dark, but he's also held elected office, local elected offices since like 1996 off and on. So he's involved in things. He just he's got some demons that keep him down.
But yeah, there's like you say, there's dozens of things that change dramatically in his life, and there's certain things that just follow him everywhere he goes, no matter what.
Yep.
That's life, isn't it? And
yeah,
like what you said about these people being, despite being completely different, being sort of connected somewhat by the series is also that takes a while to see that, but that is a phenomenon now amongst these people that's interesting.
Yep.
Because it's not the most watched thing in the world. Docuseries typically aren't, but they are celebrities in Britain much more than here, but here as well. To really anyone who's followed this, They
Oh, yeah.
represent a great deal of hope and loss and all that
Yep.
stuff, you know. It's the ultimate reality TV show in a way. It was stripped of all its stupid pageantry. These people just are what they are.
Right. Well, it's
But
interesting.
that's a powerful thing. That's compelling.
Tony, the who's one of the biggest characters in the show. He's the one they always lead off with him. The clips of him as a little kid, he's just like a little monkey, and he's just full of energy and everything. He's a cab driver, and he tells a story about someone asking for an autograph. Well, he had Buzz Aldrin in the back of his cab, so he assumed it was Buzz Aldrin, but they wanted his autograph instead. But being in these films has taken a toll on their lives too. It influences their life. In some cases, like Bruce reaches out to Neil and helps him get on his feet because he sees from the documentary that he's having troubles, and that's the kind of guy Bruce is. But one of the participants dropped out for three episodes because of the backlash of what he espoused in 21 Up, which was, or actually 28 Up. He bashed Thatcherism and the state of the world and all of that. And the tabloids just went to town on him, and he's like, nope, I'm out. And he came back.
Who needs that?
Yeah, he came back at like 52.
It's bad enough when you're a millionaire, movie star. It's
right, but when
really
you're just a
bad
normal
enough.
person, yeah.
When you're just a guy, I get it.
Yeah, and he came back because he wanted to promote his band. At 52 Up or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah,
sure. Well, and time had moved on.
Yeah.
When the British tabloids come at you, just as an aside, it's hard to explain. I don't want to say it's worse than here, but I think we're so scattered here.
Yeah.
And our news cycle moves much quicker, and our population is much larger, and the collection of like starlets and hunks that we have to pay attention to is bigger. When you become ask who's the actor, there's a bunch of them that have gone through this, but Sienna Miller.
Yep.
Ask her what that's like, that ride. It's horrendous to be the toast of the town for no real reason suddenly, and then to have everybody just turn on you and hate you. And it's a cycle that they go through there all the time, constantly, and it never stops. And the tabloids have to know better. They rip on themselves for being like that, and yet she's the one who comes to mind because she's sort of recovered in a healthy sort of way.
Well,
that we've been able to see, but it took a decade to go, of work to be thought of as an artist again, instead of just a celebrity. They just want you to be a celebrity, and it's easy to do when you don't have anything else to fall back on. I didn't know that happened to him because I left off with him.
Sure.
Basically doing that. But I was like, me, I was like,
it is an interesting phenomenon that you mentioned.
Suck it.
There's this actor that I sort of follow. I don't know if you've heard of him, Kenneth Branagh, and he talks about how he had
it's pronounced Brianna.
Oh, Brianna, right, probably.
Yeah. He was the prince of the country for a while, and then he cheated on his wife, and the divorce was all public and everything. She was famous. He cheated with somebody famous.
It's actually before that. Once you become popular, if you become too popular too quickly, have too much success, they all kind of turn on you,
Yeah, but that was
first
bad movie. All this behind the scenes drama. I mean, that was the hammer coming down.
Him and Emma Thompson, getting together and both being talented. They didn't have an easy time of it because the British somehow just want to take you down a peg if you move out of because he's working class Irishman.
It's institutional there in a way that it's not here. Here it's random sort of darts at a dartboard. It's still vicious and evil wherever you go. But there's something about us where we're like, And it's all, in a way, this is worse. Like, Paris Hilton has to go to jail for drunk driving for like the third time. And they let her out of the jail because LA jails are overcrowded and there's some real dangerous people in there. And they typically don't keep drunk drivers around who they don't consider much of a danger to society. So they let her go after a day, and all of America were like, send her back to jail, send her. And the warden of the jail was like, what? Nevertheless, they did send her back to jail because of popular opinion. That's absurd enough as it is.
Yeah.
She goes back for another couple of days, suffers. She doesn't suffer too bad, but it was obviously this whole thing to have the entire country say, no, that's not enough. We all want to see you punished more. Now, I don't have a ton of empathy for Paris Hilton, but that phenomena, that mob mentality, that's terrifying.
Well,
but what's more terrifying is that 2 days later, everyone who thought that was so important is off to other things, sleeping at night, dreaming of other stuff. Like it's just poof, it's gone.
Right.
And they're on to the next outrage.
Yep.
Britain just pounds you. They beat you like a dead horse.
We were talking before we started the show about the show Ted Lasso on Apple TV, and there's a brief plot line involving the tabloid press in there, and it's these two women who live very public lives, and the tabloids, especially in Britain, are they talk about it, are incredibly harsh, but even more so towards women. It's just
triply so.
Yeah. Probably. So any way they can in this case, it's a divorce where the man was cheating all over the place and doing all of these things, and yet in the tabloids, it's always, this guy's just like, oh, that's just him, and then just tearing down the now ex-wife.
We've gone off on a huge tangent, but I sympathize with what that guy's going through because it's a very, very real thing. Mm-hmm. And it has to be, it just has to be 100 times worse when you don't have the money and the support to fall back on when you're just a person. That's just the worst kind of 15 minutes of fame a person could have, in my opinion. I feel really, really bad.
Real quick before we move on, I did find this great quote from Michael Apted about the Up series, and Paul Almond, who was the director of the first one, and he, and like you guys said, Michael Apted was the guy out looking for what kids were going to be in this. When it first started, and he says it was Paul's film, but he was more interested in making a beautiful film about being 7, whereas I wanted to make a nasty piece of work about these kids who have it all and these other kids who have nothing.
Yep.
And and the fact that he had been afforded this, this opportunity every 7 years to go back and to be able to kind of show that through. Show the British class system through that lens.
And he's talked about sort of that aspect where at 22, that was his motivation, and how it has changed over time, how he's made mistakes. He regrets only casting 4 women, 10 men and 4 women. Yep. There's only one mixed race person who's part white, part black. Otherwise, they're all white. So they really focused on the class system and not a demographic sample. Mm-hmm. And he regrets that. At 63,
just in his defense, was tougher to do in 64 than it would be today. And
that's modern that wouldn't even have been thought of in 64.
Exactly.
Right. So they were ahead of their time in so many ways, but demographically in London and not so much.
And he talks about how he tried to predict things.
He certainly could have evened up the sexes. You think that when you watch the first one for the first time. Right. Maybe that's me watching it in the 90s going,
right.
You should have.
And one of the women, Jackie, it called him out on it, saying, when we were 21 or 28, your questions were all about when were we going to get married and did we want to have
Mhm.
children and all those things. You didn't ask me what I thought of politics. You didn't ask me about careers. You didn't ask me about any of these things. Um, and that's a sign of the times, a sign that he was, 15 years older than them.
Mhm.
Um, and, his view on things was a little different than theirs, and maybe hadn't caught up to them. If they're 28 and they're living, or 21, they're, just living the life. And he's still thinking, oh, well, women are housewives or whatever. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting. There's an interesting multi-generational story where there
Yeah.
is a distinct generation gap and push and pull between the filmmakers and the participants. No
Right.
question.
And one marriage he thought certain would break up, and he was right, but he edited it in such a way that the audience thought, oh yeah, that marriage won't last.
Mhm.
Well, I think it lasted something like 10 or 15 years longer. So, and the wife in that case refused to appear in any further episodes. And he says he regrets doing that. There's Tony, the little guy, he wants to be a jockey when he grows up. At 21, Michael makes it apparent that he thinks he'll be in jail, and he doesn't. He's probably the one person who moved outside of to being very working class, blue collar, to ending up middle class with a second home in Spain at one point.
That's middle class, having a second home in Spain.
Well, he loses it pretty quick.
It's not ruling class. I get it, but that's.
And he's still driving taxi.
Yeah, he was
while doing
on the
it.
cusp of
Right.
being upper middle
Yeah,
class.
yeah.
And
his
flew too close to the sun.
Yeah.
Look, we do have to move on, or this is going to be a 12-hour episode on Michael Apted, because the Up series is a phenomenal. We talked about how I love documentaries and watch a lot of documentaries, and I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't seen this, so I'm super excited to get to watch these at some point. So
you're gonna love it.
Now,
one more thing.
Okay.
Now, in 1991, Roger Ebert put 28 up in his list of the 10 greatest films of all time. So that should tell you need to see this.
Yeah. So
Ebert was a huge fan. On the Facebook page we posted as a hype post. We posted some Ebert thoughts on the series, and you should check that out. Or don't, but you should definitely check out the Up series. It's phenomenal. It just is. It's just amazing. It just is everything it's cracked up to be. It's hard to imagine anyone taking the time to sit through 2 or 3 of them not being super compelled by them.
But this is a guy, so Michael Apted is a guy who, started in television, and even as he got opportunities to make major motion pictures, he continued working. He would come back to television, and he would direct things for American television. He direct things.
He
for
never
British
left
television.
Documentaries behind either. He worked on dozens of different ones that aren't part of this throughout his career. He was always working on one.
Yeah, I mean, I think of going all the way back to when we were first talking about him. You guys were talking about him being, being a journeyman and being able to. I kept thinking as I was going through a thing that Harrison Ford would talk about when I don't know how he feels now, but this was years ago. He was talking about like how he doesn't view himself as an artist. He views himself more like a craftsman. He comes in, he does his job. His job happens to be playing a character, and he tries to do the best job he can. And then when the job is done, he goes on to the next job. And I sort of feel like that's, kind of what Michael Apted is. He's like this craftsman. He's like, my job is to direct and tell whatever story is there and that I get to do. And he's from doing soap opera stuff like Coronation Street when he was really young to will.
Yeah, that's where he cut his teeth on
Yeah.
actual film directing and stuff, was during Coronation Street.
And and the variety of films that we're about to start talking about here, it's kind of bonkers.
And yet they're all grounded in that let's capture a piece of reality approach to filmmaking that the Up series is, and that documentaries are. That's the recurring theme that you'll see through here.
Mm-hmm.
There's not entirely, but there's a thorough sense of biography, of
Mm-hmm.
real life story, of this actually happened and we're going to tell it as plainly and as honestly as we can. He was a great technician in that his films are all really, really well done, really well edited. So has an innate sense of storytelling, but he's not a stylist. He's almost an anti-stylist, you would say,
Mm-hmm.
when you watch his stuff, because too much style gets in the way, in his opinion, I think, of honesty. And I never read that in an interview, but you just feel it movie after movie after movie, you know.
I agree.
That we want to capture what's real here. And if we do nothing else, we want to find that real moment, that sums up the person, that sums up their mission, whatever it is. And that's I don't know, to me, that's what's special about him.
Yeah.
So
we talked about it.
Yep.
In our bizarre, remember, Joel, when we did that weird episode when I just watched Free Jack and a bunch of dumb stuff, and you were asking me about it, and it turned out to be the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The last movie on that list was Nell, which was directed by Michael Apted, which we'll mention again. But Jodie Foster had just directed Little Man Tate, I guess, a movie or two before this one, and she was asked when she was doing the talk show circuit or whatever, why don't you're a big director now, why don't you direct this? And the reason she didn't say was, you can't, it's really hard to be Batman and direct Batman, like Ben Affleck said. It's almost an unthinkable thing. Nell is not Batman, but it is a Batman-like immersive sort of character.
Yeah.
To be flipping back and forth between living the life of this unique person and being mercenary enough to make all these little artistic decisions as you go. The idea, for anyone who's acted at all, is sort of unthinkable.
Yeah.
It's not that you have to be completely method, but that switcheroo, Eastwood manages to do it, but then he says it's really difficult. And he's a movie star in a way that Jodie Foster, she's a movie star too, but she's an actor. Yeah. She said there's no better director anywhere, I think, to direct this than Michael. He was our first choice, and he gets right to the heart of what the thing is in a way that few people do. She just gave this glowing thing, and you could see whoever it was, Jay Leno or whatever, going, yeah, whatever you're talking about, while she was giving this answer. But it's a cool testament to him. No, she didn't say the part about you're an idiot. You can't be Nell and direct Nell at the same time. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
But you could see that was her first reaction almost on her face.
Yep.
The second thing was, we just made this. We had the exact right guy. And he's a guy that you guys don't even know who he is. And you'll probably never really know who he is. And yet he's the right dude to tell our story. I just thought that was kind of a neat thing.
So after he gets his first crack at the Up series in the in the second installment. It was it's his idea to go back. So that was in 1970, and in the time that he's waiting for his chance to go back and interview them all again, he puts out a few films: Triple Echo in 72, Stardust in 74, and The Squeeze in 77.
Yeah, I've never seen any of those. The Squeeze is the most significant of them, and I wish I'd seen that. But these are late 70s mystery suspense films and dramas that, if you didn't catch them back on VHS, they're kind of hard to see now because they haven't been restored much. They're not streaming because they haven't had HD upgrades, most of them. But they're telling us who's in them. Isn't Albert Finney in one of those? Doesn't really matter. The point is,
the squeeze is Stacy Keach.
Stacy Keach. That's what I'm thinking of.
Stardust is David Essex and Adam Faith.
Yeah, that's a fake story about, or it's a very real story about a fake band with a bunch of real musicians in it. That's actually a really interesting film. David Essex only had the one hit in America, Rock On, but he was a big star in England. So
Triple Echo is Glenda Jackson and Oliver Reed.
Oh, wow. Well, see, damn. So we wanted to acknowledge his feature film debut as such, but there's not a lot to say about those because we haven't seen them.
And
I'd like to.
Yeah. And then in 79, he does Agatha.
Agatha. And Rob, you mentioned this in one of your posts as one of your favorites, which I think is weird because I think this is kind of a failed movie in a lot of ways. And it's the film that caused Warner Brothers to not work with Dustin Hoffman ever again until he was in his 50s.
Well,
because he was such a pain in the butt on it. But I've also not seen it, so I know the story, and I know the story behind the story, but tell us what you like about Agatha. What's there to like?
Okay, well, so it's released in 79. I saw it in the theater when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Oh, wow. And it's the story of the very real disappearance of Agatha Christie.
Yeah, Agatha Christie disappeared for like 11 days or something. And
as we all know, if you watch Doctor Who, she was actually... these bees. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, there were aliens involved.
Indeed, of course.
But she is never explained that time. So this is a fictional film supposing a possible scenario for that.
An alien bee-like theory of the disappearance.
Right. Yeah, this doesn't have that. This doesn't go this route. This basically says that she is angry with her husband who wants a divorce. He's played by Timothy Dalton, future James Bond.
Yes.
And he basically insists on divorce, so she just heads out. She crashes her car. She gets out. She gets on train and goes to this spa that she finds out his mistress is going to. And you don't know throughout if because she is learning about the treatments at the spa. There's one dealing with electricity. She gets books, reads up on current. You don't know if she's planning to kill the mistress.
But it's a mystery within a mystery, right? Hoffman's character is
the whole country's looking for her.
Right.
And you're trying to figure out what she's
going on this adventure and solving the mystery. I don't want to tell people the entire plot of the thing.
Right.
But that's the idea behind it. It's a clever idea, but it's almost, I don't know. I haven't seen it. I wish I could talk more about it, but I know the Dustin Hoffman problems. He was just a crazy, problematic actor at the time. He's obviously brilliant. He was just about to win an Oscar, right, for Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah.
He hadn't yet when they hired him, but he was the guy you wanted to get for everything if you couldn't get Al Pacino. And
he plays a reporter, an American reporter who's over in England doing a column, and he tracks her down. He finds her when nobody else has, but he's interested in her, in the woman. And it's about him trying to piece together what she's doing and also reaching out to her, and he falls in love with her. And what's interesting is the key to this film is Vanessa Redgrave. She gives an exquisite performance. She plays timid and reticent and, shy in a way that just has this gravitas about it. You are completely absorbed by her. You can't take your eyes off of her. Just in these quiet moments, and I think it's the way Apted shot it. Just the way he puts her in a frame and what she does, you're just... I have never responded
capturing
to
the
Vanessa
essence
Redgrave
of something,
in this
just
way.
like we've been talking about all along. Capturing the essence of something somehow.
Yes.
Getting to the truth of it, whatever it is, even in this overly complicated, layered sort of mystery suspense thing, he gets to the heart of what at least the film's take on who she was as a person.
Yeah. And he contrasts her quiet performance style, which, like I say, is captivating, and Dustin Hoffman's American brashness in such a way that it really makes both performances work. Whereas either one on its own, like, you would think her playing that way, that could be one note and boring, but it isn't. There's these layers there, and they're brought out in the contrast to Dustin Hoffman, and she gets a little louder at one point and he gets a little softer at times, and it's like they are learning how they could be together.
So I'm moving on because we can't
Okay.
talk this long about these films. There's just too many of them.
There's one other thing there that Apted
Quick.
brings in class again. He's criticizing class, and he's going to do this throughout his career.
The whole
They
time.
show a shot of hundreds of people combing the countryside looking for her. The next shot is her in a bed in a hotel being served breakfast in bed.
Yeah. No matter the setting, the class divide is a really, really important. Just interpersonally at minimum, but societally throughout his work, it's definitely there.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll point those out more too as we go along.
There's his next film. It's another big.
It's
take
more
on it,
interpersonal in the next one, but it's still totally there.
And it comes to America in this one. It's the beloved film Coal Miner's Daughter, which Rob and I actually oddly enough both just watched yesterday.
Yes.
to remind ourselves, because the movie came out in '80. I'm sure it was probably in the '80s when I saw the film, and I don't think I'd seen it since.
I think it was 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Sissy Spacek win her Oscar for playing Loretta Lynn in Coal Miner's Daughter.
Yep.
So it was an Oscar film. It was one of the top films of that year in terms
nominated
of critical acclaim.
I think it was nominated for like 9 Academy Awards or something like that. One, and one for
so
Sissy
a big
Spacek.
significant step for him in his career.
So this was a big film, big musical biopic. And it was. Go ahead.
Again, he's focusing on a real life, a person.
Yep.
Now in the Up series, it's normal people, not extraordinary people.
Right.
Here it's an extraordinary person, but he's really just interested in their life for the most part, and how it plays out. He's looking at class again, but here's where he really lays out his hand, is that he is not judging these people in Kentucky, growing up in the hills in a hollow, and he is just presenting this is what their life was like. There's no point where he's judging these people who don't have a pot to piss in barely.
Yep. There's never a moment where you as an audience member, where Apted
feel
is telling
the filmmaker commenting on
where the filmmaker, where Apted is going, can you believe this?
Right.
See what I've done here? Yeah, no, this was their reality, and that and it was
he's
that
commenting by not doing that. He's saying this is just how these people lived.
Yeah, and that was
no judgment.
And Loretta Lynn was she herself has said that's why Apted was the best filmmaker to make this, because he was an outsider. He's not American, didn't know anything, so he just was like, oh, okay, this is how you live, huh?
Yeah,
okay.
let's figure this out, and then figure out what to show and what not to show, and when, and putting the puzzle of reality together. That's what he's ideally suited for. And there was movie magic with this particular film.
My other favorite thing about Apted in this, in doing Coal Miner's Daughter, was the casting of Levon Helm from the band. And
truly inspired. Yeah,
and his willingness, because Helm was not an actor, he was this musician guy. He didn't, he didn't know didn't know etiquette or the ins and outs of the biz, of the acting business. So it's like if something was inaccurate, especially from a music standpoint, Helm would be like, the famous story is he was hated being in the coffin at the spoiler alert when Loretta Lynn's father dies, but he hated being in there, but he's laying in this coffin and they're supposed to be singing Amazing Grace, and Helm sits up in the coffin and yells at everyone going, this is not how this would go. in a church like this, it's got to be the call and response version.
Helm
where,
was
you know,
an authority on that kind of music,
Yeah.
and so by having him along, you had this ambassador to getting a lot of that as authentic as possible.
Yeah,
which was,
and then for Apted to go, you know what, he's absolutely right. Let's do it, and you know, makes it.
He never Apted doesn't come out and say that he cast him to have that person on set, but it's very clear that that was part of the plan. I think that he would have it both ways. You know, a lot of minor, although it's not hardly a minor role. It's not a huge role, but it looms over the whole thing. You know, there a lot of clever casting. Well, you know, if we cast this guy in this little part, Murray Hamilton or Shane Black or whatever, you know, we'll have a screenwriter on set in case we run into trouble. You know, it's like that really was sort of built into this. It was a storytelling decision. Well, if we cast this guy who knows this stuff, we'll have this authenticity. But he did become no, not like that, like this, no. Yeah, you know, he became the musical director for at least all the practical music in the movie.
Yeah,
just kind of neat.
I was really
Levon Helm and Little Feat and just that sort of music too. It's a thing unto itself. You should check it out a little bit.
I was really surprised by the film. I didn't really want to rewatch it.
Me neither.
Not that interested in Loretta Lynn or country music, really.
Nor am I, but you guys
kind
of
know.
went, you're on
we said,
okay.
We don't remember it.
I can fit this in. I actually had time this week, so I'm like, I'll do this.
I really enjoyed the film. I knew Spacek did all her own singing, and she was great.
Yes.
I didn't know Beverly D'Angelo, playing Patsy Cline, did her own singing as well. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
And just a powerhouse appearance by an actor you don't necessarily expect that from, you know.
No.
And a sort of test case for we all had the same reaction to Beverly D'Angelo. If you haven't seen Coal Miner's Daughter and you watch it, you will have the same reaction to it. It's a universal sort of reaction, and Hollywood had it too, and she just kind of got cast off in whatever the next big hit thing Star Vehicles were, and just kind of had that whatever that magic was sort of just Hollywooded out of her. It's really a frustrating thing to watch. It's happened to so many people through the years, but women in particular, where you know, if you stay special, that's almost the worst thing you can do in Hollywood to some degree. You're going to be you know, the girlfriend next, and then you're going to be the hot wife, and then just the wife, and now your mom for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Thanks for playing.
Now, Joel,
Yeah.
were you as creeped out by their ages when they got married as I was?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I know it's true.
I mean, and that's, and I got to think that was, I think it would have been as creepy then when it came out. And that's, you know, I think that's
probably not quite.
Not
well as when the film came out.
Yeah.
When it actually happened in real life.
No, but when the movie came out, I think it was, you know, I again, I think that was part of it. And I think that's Apted going, that this is just what it was.
Well, he really tweaked it there, because when I looked it up, they were married when she was 15, but they never acknowledged that she's turned 15 in there. They always talk about her being, she's just 14 and whatever. So he leaves you with the impression that she's 14 and he's like 21. Really, she's 15. Not that it makes it a lot better, but it's like, if you're gonna want to make a point that it's kind of creepy, you leave the audience thinking she's even only 14.
Right.
Wow.
I think, you know, you got to stay true to the facts. When they started courting, she was 14.
It's
just won't mention.
Creepy either way by any modern sensibilities back in 1980 or now. It's, you know, it's the same, but it's I don't know, what do you do? It is the reality of the situation. So and I feel like, again, he sort of strives to not comment on it very much. He lets you make up your own mind. I think in that case, that's an easy thing to make up your mind about. We got to move on.
But I just want a quick Tommy Lee Jones, terrific.
Yes.
Terrific performance by him too. Coal Miner's Daughter. boy, yeah, I was not thrilled and like sitting down and watch it, but no, it was actually a really, really wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful
Yes.
time to watch it.
It's a really,
Next up,
really good film.
next year he works with the preeminent comedy genius of the time in a movie called Continental Divide.
It was
Yep.
Belushi's last movie, wasn't
Yep.
No, it's his second to last.
second to last.
Neighbors was his last.
it? Okay.
He was clean and sober for this film.
He
And then on
wanted to do
Neighbors, the
something
whole cast and
different.
crew
And
was
this is
doing coke.
it's a comedy. It's
Yeah,
a romantic comedy, but he's not a clown in it at
Yeah.
all. He plays a very real, grounded sort of dude.
And it's a Lawrence Kasdan comedy.
Yes.
If you know Kasdan's movies, they have lots of humor in them, but even you're never going to be like doubled over laughing at a
No, that's
Kasdan comedy. It's like, oh, yeah.
You know, I hadn't seen this film since the mid 80s when I saw it on cable. My dad showed it to me. He really liked it, and I enjoyed it too at the time. So I was excited to revisit it. When I saw Lawrence Kasdan's name come up in the credits, I'm like, oh, this is going to be better than I thought. It isn't. This is not the Lawrence Kasdan I've grown to know and love. It's not a bad movie, but don't see it based on Lawrence Kasdan.
Well, sure, you can. You can
because-
see it based on French Kiss. You can see it based on Dreamcatcher. It's not like Lawrence Kasdan's some sainted,
That's true.
perfect
That's true.
storyteller.
That's
But he hadn't yet or was about to write Big Chill, correct? Or had just written
I
it.
can't
Either
remember what
way,
year that is.
Big Chill
Yeah.
was successful enough that they let him direct and the screenplay for Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Empire Strikes Back were successful enough that they let him do whatever he wanted. He directed a postmodern Western, Joel and I's favorite,
Yeah.
Silverado. But watch something like, Big Chill is as good an example as any, but an even better example is Grand Canyon, which is, it's equal parts riveting and sort of brilliant and absolutely trying and annoying and preachy and pedantic and yet sort of sweet and wonderful. Like it, he really runs the gamut. He's a heavy writer, as I like to say. This film has a lot of that. It really is about these, but it really is what's delightful about it. It's about this. Set up the premise of it. It's been a while since I've seen it too, but it's about a journalist, reporter, again, who goes out to the country.
Well, his after being assaulted, and he was doing an investigative story, and the person he's investigating sends a couple thugs after him to rough him up, and his editor is like, you're getting out of town. We're going to get you out of town for your safety. And so he goes goes to the Rockies to try to interview a researcher who researches bald eagles in Colorado.
It's the ultimate.
Yeah.
You go off to nowhere and cover nothing, until this blows over sort of deal.
Yep.
But he is Mr. Chicago.
Yep.
Never left the city, and then he's having to hike up a mountain.
Right. That's thus the double meaning in the
Fish out of
name. The
water.
name is the fish out of water from a territorial standpoint, but also the what feels like crossable gulf between two different people that nonetheless connect with each other. The woman is, who plays the woman again? Is it
Blair Brown?
Blair Brown, yeah.
Yep.
It's a love story. It's a very cute, bickery love story between two very talky people in a very talky script. But the Rocky setting is very romantic, despite these two people in it sort of being at each other all the time. But there's something about it. The magic, whatever it is, works. There is a connection between them that you want to believe in really from the start, and it's kind of neat that way.
Yeah, that's how it played in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now in
Been
the
a while
Me
since
Too
I've seen
era,
it. You think it's not that way now?
the sexual politics are pretty dated and questionable. John Belushi makes moves that are not wanted, and then he gets all pissed off at her because she didn't think
Right.
his overweight body was sexy enough for her or something.
Right. And he never gives up or politely bows out, the way we're really supposed to do today. But I don't hold that against it. It's hard to, because every romantic comedy we think about where the guy just doggedly pursues his love of his life until it achieves magic.
Right.
We were all raised on that, even though we should know better by now.
Yeah. But it also it's a nice portrait of man in this era, because I think it's very typical. And then when they have gotten together, and then he goes back to Chicago and he's depressed because her life is there, he's here. She comes to visit him, and after they've been together for a while, she's got to go back, and he just gets all pouty and moody and whatever. And it's just like, this guy is not grown a bit. Yeah. Now I really like the ending. I really like parts of it. I think Belushi does has a good performance. There's a lot to like here. It would be a good remake.
Yeah, it would be an interesting, it's a movie very much of its time, is what I was sitting here thinking. But the story is
even at the time, it was a bit of a throwback movie.
Yes,
honestly.
It really was.
The relationship was very Cagney. The whole thing has that old-fashioned love story.
It's like Tracy Hepburn.
That's a good comparison. Yeah. Tracy and Hepburn. Yeah,
that's clearly what Kasdan is going.
So Apted goes from this. Apted goes from this sort of romantic comedy film. His next film is Gorky Park.
Gorky Park. Yep. I'll do Gorky Park since you guys are just staring at me. Gorky Park was a really good novel. It's a Russian mystery film. It's a story of William Hurt, who is this inspector assigned to investigate these murders in Gorky Park in Moscow that nobody really wants to know the answer to. And it's about the impossibility. We've seen this in recent projects like Chernobyl and stuff. It's about the impossibility of doing a task in this atmosphere where whatever ugly answer you come up with is going to be met with scorn by your higher ups. They don't want to be embarrassed, and they'll go to the grave as long as they can hold their heads high and not feel the shame from the government. And the story itself is overly complicated, and the solution to it is it's almost the most absurdly anticlimactic solution I can imagine to a film. The scheme or the crime or whatever's going on in it is so dumb by the end of it. But Lee Marvin brings some gravitas to it. Again, a young, interested William Hurt, putting on a Russian accent. But it's the snowy, moody, depressive Russianness of it all that it really comes alive on screen. Yep. And I won't talk more about it. Just this interests you. Gorky Park's a decent movie, but it's like a lot of these types of thrillers from this era. It's just decent. It does contain my favorite Ian McDiarmid performance of all time. That includes Star Wars and Dragon Slayer and all the other great, bizarre off the top charts cameos that he's played. Sleepy Hollow. He plays a guy who like uses molds and things to reconstruct, like to study. He's a forensics guy, but he creates these molds of people who've decayed using their bones to show what they look like. Yep. And McDiarmid clearly thought that was weird, somebody who would do that for a living. And he without stealing the show somehow, he plays up the weirdness of this guy like 100%. And even though he's barely in the movie, it's almost worth seeing for that reason.
I think what probably attracted Apted to this film was, one, a job. Yeah. I think he liked doing thrillers. He did several throughout his career.
And a gritty one that has a societal meaning hanging over it. I think
he gets to touch on his theme of class a bit, because even in the Soviet Union, it should be classless, but there's very clear class distinctions.
The class in communist KGB, Russia was rank basically, but it still very much existed. And I know that fascinated him, that phenomenon.
Yeah. And, he gets this little dig in on the classes when they're at the minister's club or whatever. And there's just this buffet all lined out. And right before that, we see William Hurt's character in a breadline.
Yep.
He's the head investigator for the police. He waits in a breadline like everyone else. On his way home with his bread for breakfast, the minister, hey, okay, come to my club. You need to relax a little. It's just this buffet of these meats and everything laid out in the pool room.
Well, and Hurt plays that guy who can't help himself too. He has authority with his foot in either world, and it's a typical William Hurt of the 80s performance. It's very internalized.
Yeah.
But you can see him exercising that little bit of pressure and the almost slight twinkle in his eye when he gets to do it to somebody who is higher on the food chain than him. That's very much an element in the film too. But we can't spend any more time on Gorky Park. We got to go.
So after Gorky Park, there's a couple more movies here that are really good. We're not gonna get too into them. He has the thriller Firstborn. He goes back to does a documentary on Sting going solo at Bring on the Night.
That's just a movie film, a concert film, but it's a pretty great one.
Yeah,
from the era.
Critical Condition, which is
Richard Pryor
comedy. But then another big movie, a movie we've talked about before.
Condition Critical or Critical really actually stands out as the complete outlier of his career. He wasn't meant to make a Richard Pryor comedy. Maybe you could make a case he could have made a decent Gene Wilder Richard Pryor comedy, but an actual wacky Richard Pryor in a hospital comedy, like it wasn't a good idea for Pryor. It wasn't a good idea for Apted. It just wasn't. It just didn't go very well.
But the next movie, a movie that we have talked about on a previous show, but a really terrific movie, Gorillas in the Mist.
Yeah. If you want to hear our deep dive-ish into Gorillas in the Mist, we did a top Sigourney Weaver performances. Gorillas is tip top on that list. Maybe it's not all the way to the top, but it's way up there. It's one of the 3 roles she was nominated for an Oscar for. Gorillas is what year? 88?
88.
88.
So that was the year she was nominated for 2 different Academy Awards, both Gorillas in the Mist and Working Girl, supporting actor and actress. She's extraordinary in Gorillas in the Mist. Gorillas in the Mist is a very real film about a very complicated and difficult person to warm up to, that also has this extra layer of this wildlife that they had to create and make believable, and these sort of African locations and things. It's a really interesting film about a really interesting person, but it doesn't satisfy in a very conventional way. I think if that woman somehow managed in real life to have some sort of human triumph at the end of her life, that film would have won all the Oscars. Unfortunately, I really do feel that way. I feel like because it's real, because there's this downbeat sort of barreling towards your doom, the light at the end of the tunnel is the oncoming train feel to the whole story. It is, people were impressed, but they didn't really enjoy themselves. I really believe that's the case. That's an extraordinary film in his filmography.
What's that you say, Michael Apted, making a film about really capturing the reality of someone's life?
Right. He does what he does in Coal Miner's Daughter. He shows this character's strengths and her weaknesses.
Yeah.
Her drive at the beginning, and then the way that she kind of went off the rails a bit at the end. It just shows it to you. And it doesn't, you don't feel he's judging her. He's showing, hey, her behavior, but you also understand why she's behaving like that, because she's a human being.
And it's a powerhouse performance by Sigourney, precisely because none of her tricks as a leading lady, none of that twinkle in her eye that is in so many, even of her best films, is completely absent in this person. She just, she really, as much as a big recognizable movie star can, really disappears into the role. And that collaboration between the two of them is extraordinary. Not to mention Rick Baker's Gorillas and Brian Brown in a pretty cool supporting role. And another guy who the world didn't really feel necessary to take seriously until you see him in this. It just everybody's work is elevated by Apted in it. It's a fantastic film.
His next film is a movie I haven't seen, so I feel like I should have seen this, but for some reason I'm not remembering it. Class Action with Gene Hackman and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Yeah, Class Action is interesting. It's completely fictional. It's your standard awesome late 80s, early 90s courtroom drama, which we used to get 10 of them a year. Now we get maybe one every 2 years. Because as cool as they are, they just aren't the thing anymore. But Gene Hackman and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio play father and daughter in it, and they're on opposite sides of the case. It really is as pitchy and trailery as that. He's a activist lawyer from the 60s, and she's a 80s corporate defender, almost because of who her father is. Everything in her life to date has been a pushback against him. And the ultimate pushback is when he comes up with this class action lawsuit against an automobile company for what they believe is a design flaw in their car that caused these freak explosions during collisions that killed a bunch of people or burned irreversibly a bunch of people. And she's defending the car company. Again, I don't want to go into all the details, I guess, but it's got a whole bunch of fantastic performances in them. It really is a story about mothers and fathers, especially a father who, his marriage to her mother lasts for their whole lives, but he's been unfaithful, and she's had to witness this and deal with it the way a child has to. And eventually it comes time where somebody has to make a big choice based on that and not based on the case or based on legal ethics. And it's great. It's all really well done. It's a really, really good movie, but it isn't based on a real story. There isn't quite a reality to cling to in this film other than the relationship stuff. And as a result, it does feel a little more like
director for hire.
Yeah, I mean, truly, I can see why the story appealed for him, but it just feels like that whatever that gritty reality is that's present in this, that's not really here. These relationships are amplified in a Hollywood way, in a very enjoyable way, but in a Hollywood way that a lot of his other work doesn't really have. So, but I like Class Action. It's a good one. Joel, you should see it if you have a shot at it. It's really a fun movie from that era.
Sure. Cool.
Not a incredible, blow your mind, fantastic one, but really good from stuff.
Yeah, like you said, we used to get a ton of those. Obviously that was leading into the Grisham era where we were just getting these courtroom dramas, seemingly every year. Next up.
And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Gene Hackman obviously is great, but it's her movie, and at a time when she was as good as anybody working. So in that way, it's fantastic to see. She's great in it.
Next up is the dual subject matter of Thunderheart and Incident at Ogalla.
Well, Incident at Ogalla is really the only other documentary we're going to call out by name here by Michael, and it's about a very specific shooting thing that happened on an Indian reservation where and to this day, this is not a problem that has been solved. A lot of people, especially women, but people just disappear. There's I don't mean to be crass, but there's a tribal lawlessness about those places that exists by design. The idea between an Indian reservation is for it to be a place where Native Americans can maintain their culture and their own system of government. But there are also pockets of America that have been completely written off to a certain degree by the federal government. who technically would oversee things. And certainly the local police aren't very cooperative with, tribal police either. So there's all this weird politics going on, very, very in reality, and Incident in Ogalla, which is an interesting story. And then Thunderheart, which is a more fantastical conspiracy story set on an Indian reservation where a half Native American FBI agent who's assigned to this case purely because he has this background, which he's almost entirely rejected, played by Val Kilmer. It goes to investigate this. First, it's a disappearance. It becomes upgraded to a murder. And how he negotiates issues of his own identity along with this crime. It's a gorgeous film shot in the Badlands of South Dakota. Kilmer is pretty great in it. Again, at this time, this magical 1992 time when Kilmer really was a great movie star. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of the same people in it as funnily enough, as Class Action has. A lot of repeat performances. It's good. And the performance I got to call out in Thunderheart that is truly magical. There's a bunch of them amongst the Native American characters, but Graham Greene, it's my all-time favorite. And Graham Greene, of course, was nominated for an Oscar for Dance of the Wolves a couple of years earlier. Mm-hmm. But this guy, Graham, as an actor and just as a person, if you know anything about him, speaks through this character in a way that is just cuts to it and is super funny and entertaining. It's an awesome performance and should be seen for that reason, even though, again, the movie and the documentary came out in the same year, and you should see both. I think they're both really, really strong.
I think what probably attracted Apted to this film was the way that the Native Americans have been treated as a second class.
The third world, right in the heart of America.
Yep.
They say that
that's
in
what
the
they
movie.
comment on as they go in. And this is a time where he is commenting. He's showing it, but he's commenting on the way of how could you let this happen? How could you leave this group of people to this? You say you're doing this so they can, have their own culture and maintain their whatever, but it's really just a way to keep them down, to wipe them out.
Fence them in and forget about them.
Yep.
Exactly. And the fact that they don't even agree amongst themselves and are motivated by all the same wonderful and awful things that anyone else is motivated by, whether it be money or whatever. Yep. It's an interesting film in that way. It has all those layers to it. I quite like it. I watched it last summer because it came out in high def online, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't watched this," precisely because it's just been trapped on DVD, kind of, And it was great. I'm glad I watched it. Really good supporting bits by Fred Ward and especially Sam Shepard.
Yeah. Yep.
He's fantastic in it.
You talked about how beautiful the movie looks. Let's any chance to bring up Roger Deakins.
Yeah, that's right. He's the cinematographer.
That explains it all.
Yep.
It's as well shot. It just really captures a sense of place, both the horror of it and the wonderful mystery of it all at the same time. It's really, really great in that way.
Yep. Another sort of thriller movie that Apted does is Blink the very next year in '93.
Yeah, let's spend no time on Blink outside of a couple of things. Blink was written by his wife at the time, so it's not a coincidence that he found himself working on it. But Blink is an above average. This is a film where you can tell he really decided, perhaps because he didn't really have a hook into what this was, as far as what the meaning of his life's work was. So this is the chance for him to show some Hitchcock-like style. And the great thing about Blink is that he does it in spades. Blink is about a sort of a punk rock violinist in Chicago who, because of this surgical miracle, regains her vision. And in the few days while she's coping with her vision, she may or may not have witnessed a murder. She might have imagined it. We don't really know. It's all that like Madeline Stowe vision, Predator vision and Jaws vision.
Yep.
This film has Madeline Stowe vision where we see things that she thinks she's seeing or not sure about. It's very, very cool and done in a very cool way. The lower class Chicago-ness of it too is really, really well realized in the film. She plays a violin in a really cool 90s band, a real life band called the Drovers. Again, we're watching, go back to the David Essex film, Coal Miner's Daughter. Here we have music again, and he really did find the most authentic Chicago ethnic club band that you could possibly find, and cast her alongside these real people, and it plays great. Aidan Quinn is the cop who shouldn't be falling in love with her, but does anyway. The rest of the movie is kind of cliche, but even for a film like that, it's still there's a lot to recommend it. It's really, really awesome. And Madeline Stowe, I don't know, to me, Michelle Pfeiffer is probably the best actor of that generation as far as females go. Madeline is a close second. Whenever I look at a rough performance by a female in a movie in the early to late 90s, I go, what would that movie been like? What would Cutthroat Island be like if Madeline Stowe starred in it instead of Gina Davis? It would have been 3 times as good. And it's a fun game. I invite you to play if you want. She's awesome in Blink too, in a very typically thankless damsel in distress kind of role. So
yeah. The next year, a role that Madeline Stowe did not play was a movie that we already talked about. We talked about it this a chunk. Nell.
Yeah.
Which another.
Jodie's from that generation too. I tend not to think of her that way because I've known her since she was 5 years old or whatever. So she kind of comes off as slightly different. We talked about Nell in the Nell episode. I don't remember what we subtitled that one.
Yeah.
But I really do go into it in depth there. It's a wonderful movie. Watching it's this wonderful postcard too of Natasha Richardson and Liam Neeson's love affair. That's alive in that movie. And normally I sort of try to play down the real life romance. I don't think there's anything more annoying in all of film than watching Penelope Cruz and Tom Cruise crush on each other in Vanilla Sky. I think that just makes me want to throw up every time I see it. So I usually think that reality imposing itself on storytelling is irritating. But again, it's Apted, so he captures the simplicity of this relationship. And of course, the working relationship with Jodie, creating this character. Nell is a play, and it has all the benefits of a play, and Apted managed to broaden the scope of the thing from also not being a play, from being worthy of cinema in a really elegant and awesome way. It's also one of his best films, I think. It's a little, overtly metaphorical. It's a little hard to believe the reality of it, but there's some human realities that come through anyway, and I think that's what's neat about a high concept piece like this.
Yeah, I think it's also one of his most beautifully filmed.
Yeah,
it looks.
This is the first movie we've come to. It's his first film that he shot in scope. All the rest of these films have been shot with spherical lenses, very simply like documentaries. Yeah. He did a few more coming forward here, but this was his first film where it's a widescreen film, not Gorillas in the Mist, not Thunderheart. Nell, the movie based on a play. It's almost like he wanted the lenses to help him make the story feel bigger than the little intimate thing that it was, and it is gorgeous. I agree.
I sort of see a connection between Coal Miner's Daughter and this, in that they probably said he's a guy who will point the camera at this and not judge.
Yeah, not get in the way of it.
Yeah. And just let the audience experience it without a bunch of judgments and critiques.
And it's neat. There's a thing going on over the top of it, a theme of how our reality, our world, our present day, whatever you want to say, that we all take for granted and see as a rather innocuous thing. This character is at so much risk. There's so much danger coming at her because of her nature from the most innocuous of things. And that creates real tension in the film that I think is really awesome.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's delving into what are the rights of this person. What class of citizen is she?
Right.
Does she have a right to make her own decisions?
Right.
Yeah, that's a great take on that. Next up is we're going to skip over Extreme Measures, which is
Another Gene
shows
Hackman movie with
yep,
Hugh Grant.
medical
Takes place in a
thriller. Yep.
hospital.
Um,
Pretty rote.
and then Michael Apted is brought in on the Bond franchise.
Right.
In The World Is Not Enough.
We're just, Rob, I don't know if you got a ton to say about The World Is Not
Nothing.
Enough. We're not going to talk about The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah.
We go over The World Is Not Enough at length in the Bond episodes. You can find it, I believe, in the second one.
I think it's the second one.
I think we got the Dalton and Pierce Brosnan films knocked out in the second one.
I put it second in Brosnan's films, Bond films.
Yeah,
GoldenEye first, and then that one.
Around
That's all I have to say about it.
Yep.
I put it probably third. I'd have to go back and look at the rankings, but that's not so important. This is director for hire purely.
Yeah.
There's no room for Apt to be, and he knows it, to be commenting on anything or telling you anything or just doing anything really other than shooting first unit on a Bond movie, which is a job in and of itself. But it's an accomplishment because it's not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big enterprise. The film's got a lot of cool action in it. Go back.
And I hope he got paid well.
And he definitely got paid.
Because I'm sure he doesn't for the Up films.
Well, and he's a British, right? He's a British guy who, has that. All those movies are shot by a couple of them by Australians, but all the Bond movies are deliberately shot by British nationals because you got to be one to sort of get it.
Yeah.
And he gets it. He steps back and lets it happen. And there's some great stuff in that, actually. Yeah. There's a really interesting villain. There's some interesting reversals that a lot of these films don't have. But there's some really dumb stuff in it too. It's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring up, so after The World Is Not Enough, he does a documentary in the same year called Me and Isaac Newton, where it's just interviewing scientists and stuff about technological advances and things that have happened in science. But then a couple years later, he does the movie Enigma.
It's one of my favorite movies ever. It's certainly amongst my favorite World War II movies.
Yep, ever. about the cryptographer.
It's a novel spy thriller version of the story of the code breakers at Bletchley Park during World War II. A much better, more Apted styled biography film based on Alan Turing's actual life with Benedict Cumberbatch came out a few years back. This isn't that. It has a similar type character at the center of it, but it's all been fictionalized for the sake of having this mystery play out. Mm-hmm. But code breaking is fascinating. This group of people that did it are fascinating. The novel is a really, really clever mystery, and the screenplay is by Tom Stoppard, and it's just bliss. If you really like wonderful writing in every scene and everything just to click, like poetry, Stoppard, it's just, he's tough to beat. And it really does feel like it's Stoppard's voice that's being delivered more than Apt's. But again, it's a widescreen World War II adventure. It's a romance that takes place behind the scenes. It jumps all over in time. It has every cool British actor alive in it, pretty much. It's Dougray Scott, who's a really, really good actor, but is a bit mercurial and never got to be a star because he got cheated out of being the Wolverine by just bad timing.
By Tom Cruise overshoots.
Yeah, exactly. On the worst Mission Impossible movie, if not the worst spy thriller of all time, of which Dougray's kind of one of the few guys who actually gets to the end of that movie with his dignity somewhat intact. It's great though. Dougray Scott, Saffron Burrows, Jeremy Northam, and Kate Winslet. That's the central core of people in it. A woman has disappeared from the staff of Bletchley Park during World War II. Why? The code breaking that they worked so hard and that they're getting the upper hand in the war has stopped working, and they have to figure out a way back into it because these giant armadas of merchant ships are coming over with all the stuff that England desperately needs to survive. and they have to do this thing that took them months and months and months to do in the first place, and they got to do it in a couple of days or they're screwed. That's the story that looms over it. Nikolai Coster-Waldau, Tom Holland, and Matthew McFadden. It just packed to the rafters with so many cool people. Nicholas Rowe. I could just go on and on. I love Enigma. I love it. As a wartime romance, I think it's unparalleledly good. As just a mystery, it's really, really excellent. As a war movie that's from a different perspective that, at least up until that point, had not been really shown on film. It's incredible. It's got an amazingly, sweepingly romantic John Barry musical score that goes along with it too. That said, it's a put on. It's a wartime romance. It's that, it's got all that in it. Even though Doug Ray and Kate Winslet are really a pregnant Kate Winslet who they hide her pregnancy, but she looks kind of chubby and not very glamorous in the film, we'll just say, which is wonderful. Those two characters ground the thing in a sort of wonderful way. She has a Hermione Granger line somewhere in it that I just love. It's, I will no longer be taking part in this amateur sleuthing adventure.
Oh, love it.
I love it. I love Tom Stoppard, and I like Michael Apted, and I love John Barry, and I for what, call me a dork, but I like World War II, and I love romance, and both kinds of romance, the ugly you've been rejected and you can't deal with it side is played with a lot of verisimilitude in this film. It's awesome, and it's very clever in a very British way while still being emotional. And Mick Jagger produced it. Mick Jagger has this huge collection of Enigma paraphernalia from the war, of which he lent to the movie, and he is the reason it happened, because no Hollywood studio really wanted to make that film.
Sure. All right.
Very classy.
So after Enigma, he works with Jennifer Lopez on Enough, that's a pretty good movie, actually.
Yeah,
it's not a bad movie.
If it had been a few years earlier and Ashley Judd had done it instead of Jennifer Lopez, you'd have had a super huge hit on your hands, I think.
Yeah.
As it is, domestic abuse thrillers are, I don't know, they drive you along because domestic abuse is very cinematically compelling, but they also, that sort of like Hitchcock turned the tables, kind of that sort of storytelling attached to something as ugly and awful as domestic abuse always feels a little
Yeah. I think I really like the way you just put that. Yeah.
And that movie's no exception. It works, and it kind of makes you feel a little dirty too.
But the next movie we're going to quick talk about is Amazing Grace from 2006.
That's my other favorite. Rob mentioned his two favorites. My two favorites are these two subtle British movies that he made at the end of his life. Amazing Grace is about Lord Wilberforce and the abolition of the British slave trade. And it's this lavish period drama, again, with all these incredible actors: Ciarán Hinds, Toby Jones, Michael Gambon, Romola Garai, Rufus Sewell. And at the heart of it, in his best role ever, Ewan Gruffydd, who we know from the Tim Story, those awful Tim Story Fantastic Four movies, amongst other things. He's a pretty decent actor. He's really, really good in this. Benedict Cumberbatch is in it, plays his best friend and the youngest at the time ever Prime Minister of England. The British slave trade is terrible, but it's not really about that. It's about this guy and his life and the joys of life, and how slavery makes a perversion of government, and what an absolute economic battle it was, and what a class struggle, Rob, it was to penetrate where the money was in England, to get them to get rid of this extremely lucrative industry. I just love that film. I really think it's beautiful and an incredibly inspiring story.
Yeah, I think this is obvious why Apted did this one, because it's all about class.
Albert
It's about
Finney.
how the upper classes keep the lower classes down because it's profitable to them.
Right.
And this and Enigma are films I had not seen before that I watched in the last 2 weeks. And I completely agree with you on Amazing Grace. It's a really good film.
Yeah, I
was
adore it.
really
He
moved.
made a couple more, one of which we'll talk about here. But to me, that's you can sign your Michael Apted. You can sign your name at the end of that one and say,
Yeah.
"Look, I did it. I did it."
Yeah.
I really do feel that film's like a culmination of things. It's also this wonderful character story about this guy who, because of his lot in life, because he inherited his lordship, is able to argue these things in the House of Lords, but who really was meant to not be that at all. And that sense of destiny, he made the most out of it. No question. He's considered a hero in England. Albert Finney plays the ex-slave trader who actually wrote the hymn Amazing Grace, who's something of a mentor to this, which apparently was a true relationship. He's living as a monk now in the time of the story. And it's great. I just dig it a lot. So, but you didn't want to comment on Enigma because you don't want to pop my balloon. Apparently you didn't like
exactly.
That's very polite of you. I love Enigma too for sort of different reasons.
I love Kate Winslet.
That's something.
He has a couple more movies that at the end of his life here. Chasing Mavericks, a surfing movie. Unlocked, sort of another spy thriller-y.
Yeah, a low rent
film.
spy thriller. It's above average straight to video spy thriller,
Sure.
but it's still just
but he also directs in 2010 The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Another director for hire show.
But
I haven't seen that one. I bought it on 3D, but I knew I needed to watch the first two again first, and I didn't have time to do it. So
you don't have to do that. There's no look. Enigma, love it or hate it, is labyrinthian and has a lot going on in it that you've got to dissect and figure out. Right? It's got all these threads. It's literally a colored yarn on the board sort of film. I can assure you that the Narnia films are not. And the signature of Apt's film is that Andrew Adamson, who directed the first two and sort of oversaw the production, and Don Treader proves it, he did a brilliant job of making those cinema fantasies that let the greater meanings of C.S. Lewis's teachings happen on their own. He avoided all the places where somebody just looks at you and tells you. You know what I mean? Don Treader doesn't. It doesn't. And the last scene in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is a really enjoyable light fantasy novel, is this just obnoxiously pedantic metaphor on the afterlife and all the things about Christianity that even somebody prone to Christian values will find difficult to embrace fully. And it's all kind of there. And he doesn't do anything to disguise any of it. And the whole movie is kind of like that. That said, big screen adventure story, it's neat that even at this point in his career, they were asking him to do this kind of work. The kids in the previous two Narnia films were fantastic. 3 of them come back in this one. Actually, they all do to some degree, but primarily it's the younger two's film. Will Poulter, who's become something of a celebrity now and is a pretty good actor, plays their cousin, who's one of the most obnoxious kids in all of literature, and he pulls that off pretty well. So lots of huge, cool effects. Yeah, I don't know. It's not garbage, but it's there was a push and pull between Adamson and Disney and Walden Media, who holds the rights to the Narnia films, that Disney and Andrew Adamson won when they were on board. When Disney let it go and Fox picked it up and Walden was in charge, you got straight up Christian allegory. And if you don't like that, you're probably not going to like Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
So, then Michael Apted, so he passed away at the beginning of the new year here at the age of 79. He is he was awarded the Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George in 28. So he is Michael Apted CMG on his name for his services.
He was a really good producer too. He produced Bram Stoker's Dracula amongst other real highlights throughout his career. Like he kept busy.
Yep.
Truly.
But obviously most well known as a director, and yeah, I love what you two, the two of you especially, have brought up. You know, that there is a, for a guy who seemingly in some cases a director for hire, some cases you know, something of a craftsman who just is making you know, just telling stories. Yeah, there is a specific humanity, a through line of humanity in all of these films, whether regardless of genre. And I think that's really cool.
Class and culture are the themes, and the raw nerve human element is pretty much exposed in virtually everything we've talked about. So he really does find his way to that in a beautiful way. And sometimes in a unique and even off-putting way, but in a way that always feels true. And what more really can you ask of a filmmaker than finding the truth in stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I love the symmetry of his career too, that begins with the Up series and it ends with the Up series.
Yes,
that's
and
nice.
Roger Ebert asked him if he died first before any of the participants, should someone else take it over? And Roger thought yes they should, and Michael agreed. He said he'd hoped that somebody would. Now one of the participants in the Up series has died before 63 Up, but that's the first one, and now Michael, and I hope they at least do one more. He talked you know, a few episodes ago about working with the same editor, the same photographer throughout the series, or you know, for the most recent, you know, he kind of keeps a family with him. He's family with all of these participants in a way. That's how it feels for him and for them, I believe. And so I'm hoping that somebody who's maybe worked on the films with him can pick up the reins and at least go 70 Up. The symmetry of that
is nice.
You know,
I agree. I hope they get there. Yeah. I think they will. I think that's a series that means a lot to everybody who's come across it, and it means a lot to England, and I think it's safe that will happen. Yep. Will it be the same, or how will it be different? All of those questions are interesting, but I feel like they have to do 70 Up. They just have to, and they really probably should end it there so that we don't necessarily have to experience the decay of it in a negative way.
Yeah, we don't need to see the countdown to everyone's death. Now we're down to 3, and then there were 10,
100, and
it's inevitable that it goes that way, and I wouldn't mind missing out on that.
Yep.
Although there is something to, you know, like we say, I see
it does reflect 63. Life, but
yeah, I see 63 or whatever, you know, coming to terms with that. In 63 Up, there's one character who's been diagnosed with throat cancer, and you know, that's where it's left at the end of the film. He's just kind of gotten that news, and he's started some therapy, and he's dealing with that. Now, my dad died of throat cancer, and so, you know, right there, I'm like, I want to know what happens to him.
Yeah.
You know, I hope it goes on.
Yep. Well, yeah. One last word, quick on Michael Apted is you don't have a career, in this business for this many years and to do this, huge variety of work if you're not, also probably a pretty good and fair person.
Or an absolute tyrant that everyone is afraid of. It's pretty clear from all the interviews and the things done with Michael over that he really is a very conscientious guy.
Yep.
Who really has grown the way an artist does. Rob pointed out, looking back at his work, being introspective, especially within the documentary series, and seeing a different side of himself in the different episodes and things. That's the sign of a great artist. And you see it, you do see the passion projects go away and just who will hire me for what at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But even the one that he snuck in there is just superlative. So he definitely seems to be the former. Sorry, I just wanted to point out that.
No, that's great.
There's a couple evil guys still working.
That's true. There is that. So thank you, Michael Apted, for this incredible body of work.
Rob, thanks for coming on board.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, thank you, Rob, for coming on. And thank you, listener, for coming and joining us on this first episode of season 4. We have Ryan and I thank you, Ryan, for Ryan has come up with some real fun ideas that we're going to do, some topics we're going to.
Yeah, Rob actually wrote us a note, a producer's note, if you will, type of note. Not a, hey, how you guys doing note, although it's sort of in there. And mostly it was a, you guys should do this. You should do this. You should do that.
And while we rejected pretty much everything that he said,
you guys should hype what you're doing next. And I'm like,
yeah,
we don't know what we're doing next sometimes till Thursday. I mean, it's like,
right.
Sorry.
But
now we do. So
yeah.
Next week, the alternate Oscars for 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we'll be looking at.
It wasn't that long ago. Seems like 40 years ago. It's going to be a really weird trip back in time, but we're going to take it. Mm-hmm. Then the year in review, and it's been a big year. Yeah. It's been a crazy year. Year in review, kind of part 1 and part 2. Where we'll go over the other things we watched that weren't quite Oscar worthy.
Yep.
And then after that, Joel.
Then after that, hey everybody. It's going to be 100, episode 100. Yes. So, there'll be that should be a fun, hopefully we'll put together something, real silly and fun and goofy to celebrate.
That'll be up to Joel. So he gets all the props if it's awesome. And if it sucks, he gets all the blame.
All on me. It's all on my shoulders. Hop on, gang. I will carry us to the mountaintop.
So your alternate Oscars show, you are looking at the films that won Oscars in 2020 and what should have won, what you would give it to instead?
Well, we talk about it in depth at the beginning of the show, but we sometimes we agree with what won, but we force ourselves to pick an alternate.
Okay.
That's what the show is about. And the alternate does not need to be nominated. Mm-hmm. That's the game. What the episode is let's look at these movies a year later that were nominated for Best Picture, everyone, and for the other assorted sort of Oscar-worthy films of the era. And let's just talk about these movies now that we've gained a little non-award season perspective on them. So that's the ultimate goal of the episode.
Yep.
The choosing is just sort of a fun game we force ourselves to play.
Thanks for that is what is coming up, and we hope you will join us. Of course, you can reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan Facebook page, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Instagram and Twitter, and the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube. You can leave us a comment below. We hope you also will subscribe. So thank you once again, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, listener. We would do this, but then we'd just be shouting into the void. So thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.